Perhaps mass adoption, especially mass adoption in educational contexts, speaking with this particular community of people, this audience, this group that is gathered here for this particular event. I think that's where I can contribute the most from my particular roles and expertise. We see a lot of wonderful case uses and technical vocational training. We just heard from medical and nursing practitioners using this. But when we start to feel like XR and other technologies, related technologies, feels more like the air we breathe, when we learn and we teach, when we're getting beyond the fields of study that are active in participating in their development, i.e. outside of the STEM fields, things like marketing or tourism and hospitality, or perhaps things like journalism. That's when I feel it might be a great indicator of we're starting to hit bigger mass adoption, and especially we'll get more inroads in perhaps K-12 education and more of the outlying fields, the less techie fields moving forward. My name's Eric Hawkinson. I'm based in Kyoto, Japan. My day job is educator at a university in Kyoto. I have some other roles that are displayed up on the screen here, and they will be coming up here and there as I try to give us a helicopter view of the state of research, the goings-on of using various XR technologies, spatial computing technologies in education, higher education, K-12 education. And how I'm going to help us do that is, I know there's several different kinds of audience members here. Some of you are developers, some of you are making hardware and software products, but a lot of you that I've talked to over the past day or so really want to understand educators, institutions, and how to connect what you're doing, what you're developing, and your services that you're creating to connect with them. And so I'm going to try my best to give you some context through first laying some groundwork on the state of research, especially when thinking about how this is connected to teaching and learning. Then I'm going to show us two development projects that are now not just at one institution, but many institutions, one in augmented and one in virtual reality. Then we'll talk about how these are being deployed, not just at my institution, but at institutions that I consult with, collaborate with, and some of my colleagues from around the world. How these are facilitated, mostly in higher education and K-12 settings, some of the pain points that educators are dealing with when trying to implement, use, and disperse these technologies in various educational contexts. And then we'll go into how we're trying to curate, develop, incubate, and develop communities of practice around these technologies to further support the further proliferation to this mass adoption of which I started off the talk today. So again, my name's Eric. If I go a little fast, all of the things, like any good educational technologist, can be found online, erichawkinson.com, and you can also speak to me later for slides, citations, research papers, project summaries, et cetera, et cetera. So again, my name's Eric. Thanks for being here. All right, so let's start with the current state of how we're thinking and learning about the effects. What happens when we start to use XR in various educational contexts? What I'll start with something down here, as I cherry-picked a study, a meta-study, meaning a group of researchers took a bunch of different studies, approximately 50 different studies, and did an analysis of the effects, both good and bad, of deploying IVR, mostly headsets, in various educational contexts, from everything from like nursing to physics to spatial computing and other things like that. So what we see here in the middle is 0.38, and that is the mean for all of these studies. There's about approximately 50 studies between 2016 and 2020, and they're looking for measurable pre- and post-test gains or losses when comparing more traditional approaches to learning a topic or comparing that to putting them inside a headset, IVR. And what we see out of all of those particular studies, I picked this one in particular because it is also kind of matches what we see in our research groups based in Japan and other places around the world, but also anecdotally what we see at our university when we're dealing with our students in various fields that I'm going to show you today. So the average of these 50 studies is 0.38 standard deviations, meaning that typically it's small but significant improvements over more traditional methods. Of course, why and how is the big nuanced question that we need to be asking when we think about these gains that we get when we use these technologies. Most of the research that was looked at in this meta-study, it's across the board. It's a wide depth, but most of them saw very modest to low significant gains in using IVR to more traditional routes. So they tested them before, tested them after. They have different ways of assessing. Sometimes they're paper tests to see if things were learned, what concepts were learned, actions will be able to perform better. And what we learned, what we want to take away from this particular way is it's, especially in educational contexts, it's not necessarily the technology, it's more of the implementation strategy, it's more of the intervention of which that goes through the educational processes. It's the onboarding, it's the scaffolding, it's the reflections, it's all of that educational stuff that happens before and after. And that's what we would expect at least some gains in these kinds of studies because there's extra effort, there's extra thought being put into the type of learning that this technology should be put through. So we can see both through our research in Japan and through this particular study that it's not just sufficient to think about it's better or worse to use XR in particular or different educational contexts. It's how it's being used, how it's being deployed, and your assessment methods before and after, trying to figure that out. So if you're a commercial entity and you want to use some of this as far as to extol the benefits of this technology to a possible client, you can easily find some studies that show huge gains in almost multiple fields somewhere in the research. But also be aware that if you're dealing with, for example, a higher education institution, they can also, excuse me, find a piece of research that will refute that or maybe show an opposite effect in a similar situation. So what you need to do is look at the benefits. What exactly are you trying to pinpoint? What benefits are you trying to exacerbate or look at that these technologies might bring forth? And so working with our research group in Japan and looking at the research from this particular study and others, there is a whole breadth of possible ways that you can kind of come down on, pinpoint in to either help develop your products or services further for educational purposes or to kind of pinpoint something that's happening that you're doing to entice or to appeal to educators. Of course, in the research, the biggest coined term for this is immersive learning. That's what most researchers in this field are calling this particular mode or part of inquiry. So thinking about using XR or AR, VR in educational context, immersive learning is kind of like the key term, the coined term that is being used here. And so it's no kind of surprise that one of the big things that XR can offer is immersion. And in the research, it's still debated. It's still love to be nuanced and talked about. What exactly is immersion? How do we measure it? What exactly is happening in our brains when we think we're immersed? Two main concepts are present in this particular benefit, and that is the idea of presence and motivation. And presence can be felt in a bunch of different ways. So you can have spatial presence, being when you're in an IVR, you're actually feeling like you're physically at a location or with certain people. There's narrative presence, which we have when we watch movies. And so we feel like we're a part of the story. We're immersed in this world. We're immersed in this situation. We're feeling empathy with these characters. And research has shown that that is probably one of the more stronger points, and the spatial presence and other forms of presence, telepresence, co-presence, as other types of presence, is amplified by our ability to tell stories. So if you can tell a good story, you can amplify that with these other types of presence that the technology can give us. And we can even see through some of the research that, for example, cyber sickness is decreased if we're able to have a narrative presence in these environments before we go into IVR. Contextual information, right? So a lot of these things are related. So contextual information is related to learning analytics, right? So we can gather more information about the learner, what they're engaging with, what they're looking at, how long they spend on certain items, how they physically orientate themselves to the content and with other people in the environments. And we can use that to further contextualize, individualize the information. It's very powerful as far as the other terms of presence and motivation as well. If it's more tailored to a particular student's needs or interests, motivation goes up, immersion goes up, presence goes up as well. Engagement, especially first time, second time, third time users, there's a bit of novelty. We can all see this when we first start to use these technologies. But if the content isn't compelling, if you aren't present in the story or the environment or feel like you're getting value out of it, that novelty wears off quite quickly. And so previous speaker talked about the dice. It's kind of a way that we kind of evaluate and understand when and how to use these technologies. But that is changing over time because as this technology gets more widespread, gets a little bit cheaper, the way that things we evaluate to simulate, if they're perhaps maybe a little less dangerous or a little less inconvenient, the give and take with that is changing over time. Special ed, kind of near dear to my heart. There's a lot of promising research of using these technologies for students in all types of learning disorders, from autism to dyslexia to other special needs students might have. So there's a lot of great research happening that extols the benefits of these technologies in those particular contexts. And the type of research that's happening around them are all over the board. What we'll see here today is mostly related to implementation where I live and how effective it is. So on the other end of that, though, we have some challenges. So we have our research group, and we published this last year. And when we're thinking about the return on investment, in the educational context, we're mostly concerned when our investment is, did we have better learning outcomes? Did we have more equitable outcomes? Did the distribution of those learning outcomes get flattened, perhaps? Are things more easier and equitable or easy to reach for the teacher and the student? Are things more well understood? And are those skills transferable to wherever they might go? So there's a whole bunch of challenges that are laid out in this particular research, but I want to kind of pinpoint a couple of them that are probably important to people in this room. So the technical challenges, right? So especially dealing with high fidelity, high tech, there's a lot of calibration that needs to happen. There's a lot of bandwidth that's needed sometimes. There's a lot of facilitation of space, hardware, and software. And when we're thinking about the digital divide in education, meaning the separation between the haves and the have-nots as far as digital literacy, being able to use technology, and digital access, being able to have the latest devices, we see that being exacerbated slightly when we start to use software, hardware that employs the latest fidelity, the highest poly counts, et cetera, et cetera. So in educational fields, we usually see things that are a little less close to the cutting edge of technology, and that's by design because we want to diminish this digital divide and have things more accessible to more students. A couple things also on here. Facilitating these environments are sometimes hard for educators. Educators, not just education, but we tend to use technology as we used technology in the past. Like the internet was started with static pages, much that look like magazines and websites. So teachers have their curriculum, they have the way of doing things, and they want to think and transfer those to what they're doing, perhaps in XR. And sometimes that doesn't translate well, so you need a champion, you need the people involved to help teachers translate the way of doing things, the ideas they want to convey, and put those through the lens of these technologies. So 2 big challenges to be met, and others that I can go into. Privacy is also a big concern. Move fast and break things is not really something educators want to hear, especially dealing, the younger you go down the chain in the US, like things like HIPAA compliance, COPA compliance, GDPR in Europe, are more stronger for using, especially with young children. And so that is a big concern for educators as well. All right, let's talk about 2 big implementations of this that I developed. This one started about 10 years ago. And I shouldn't name the name of the company, but they were represented actually at AWE many, many years ago as well. But considering a low-tech situation, it was started with a grant, I think 2013, to develop augmented reality materials for English textbooks for English learners in Japan. So we started by augmenting textbooks, but really that spread to the school seeing this technology and bringing it outside the classroom. This particular school was doing community engagement as a main source of the curriculum. So we had these big rallies every year, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. It got as big as 250 people in the last year, where we put groups of people together, used this app that was mostly based on image recognition, and threw them out in the city in teams, and they got to know what to do in a disaster by visiting the fireplace and going through these kind of augmented reality location-based challenges, or visiting City Hall and learning how to contribute to the conversations happening around local taxes, garbage collection, etc. You can see some examples of this before, but what this has evolved into, which is, I think, the most powerful thing and what educators really want, are authoring tools for their students. Me, in my classes, which I'll share with you in just a moment, I really want my students to kind of understand their role in whatever field they're in. That might be journalism or tourism or whatever their role in shaping the future of these technologies. It gives them a little more motivation, gives them a little more understanding, and might help them in their prospective careers after they graduate. So we're using these to let students actually now create their own, for example, gamified tours, adventures in perhaps migration studies, if you can believe that or not, or saving the environment, location-based, just getting them to think about connecting digital things to real things. Now moving on to virtual reality. This is a project that we started in 2018. We had a group of students from our university volunteering to go down to Kyoto Station and guide people around the city as a part of their vocational training to prepare for a career in tourism and hospitality. So I devised a quick VR module for them to get ready for that process. They're not native English speakers, but they were able to think about designing, curating, guiding, what to say, where to go, what to do, using virtual reality. And at that time, we were using some Google products, Google Tour Creator, Expeditions, that have joined the pile on the Google graveyard since. And so we started developing our own platform. And during the pandemic, we went online, and down here you can see what we did online. We actually made a persistent virtual space that became a tour museum, where students that are creating these tours put posters of their hometowns on this virtual location, and when you went up to the poster and touched them, you would go to these places. And now that we're back in the classroom, we have developed a space for this. I'll show you in just a moment, where students are actually using both the physical space and the tour locations and the VR contents to actually simulate tour businesses moving towards the future. In Kyoto, we have a concentration issue. Revenge tourism is a thing where we are. Over-tourism is a thing in Japan right now. And we're thinking about ways to talk with the city and there are tourism students, to let them travel the road less traveled by means of appealing to them using these technologies. So this has iterated on over the years, and have a couple more iterations to share moving forward, but not quite ready to share just yet. A couple of papers still in peer review. Right, so we take all these things. So both of those that I just showed you started small, and we started building them into the school curriculum. That was just the way that we started introducing these technologies. I was championing that and bringing it forward. That's just one way of doing that. And through our doing this, the school recognizes some benefits. So when it came time to reinvent the curriculum, update the curriculum, all of these coursework that you see above here are either taught by me or supported by the XR initiatives through our lab. Gamified experience design is a class I teach that uses the augmented reality, and students are learning, marketing students are learning how to use this, tourism students, etc., location-based, thinking about AR in their future careers. Immersive technology workshop is the My Hometown project. Mostly tourism students are using this to simulate tour business simulations. But it's starting to expand out, so other faculty members see this. Modern United Nations, we made a digital twin of the Security Council chamber, and now they're using this in an event all over Japan to simulate and have diplomacy, leadership, negotiation trainings inside of digital twins and virtual reality. So in a physical space, it kind of looks like this now. So we went online, a lot of the stuff got automated with things like LMS, like Moodle or online things. Students were learning how to create these things through automated processes asynchronously. So when we started coming back, we were allowed to update a lab, and it looks a little bit like this. The centerpiece being something called the U Theater, put together very cheaply and designed by me. They can get very expensive, but it's actually not so bad to actually make these things on your own these days using simple projection mapping technology. It's a 5-meter dome, so now you can see students now taking off the headset when we're together in a classroom and giving these curated tours of their hometowns or their business situation, simulations, actually with small groups of students. And now we're bringing students in to experience virtual reality in this particular space. And there's also headsets here, and we're learning how to integrate them in with different classes and coursework with our faculty members. And that's called the Future Hubs. But we also want to connect these to other labs around the world. And so we're starting a community of practice, most notably our research group, MAVR in Japan, but we're also connecting with other labs around the world. So when we think about my journey that I just showed you with this particular, starting from zero, having a champion, now we're learning other ways that other schools are integrating these in. For example, in Glasgow, Scotland, they did an internal grant competition and got ideas from faculty of how they might want to integrate XR into their curriculum, and they teamed them up with somebody from the IT department that they thought was either low-hanging fruit or interesting or easy to accomplish, gave them some money, and they paired them up together and developed things. And from that, they're starting to expand on their XR offerings in their university. 2 years ago, I did a visiting professorship at the University of the Philippines, and they did a different approach. They chose a couple of departments, the nursing department and the historical preservation initiatives. And then they took the IT department and gave some trainings. I helped them do some workshops, and now they're curating those specific fields that they want to help develop and move forward over time. And so this group, we're learning some fascinating things. Open educational resources in XR is a big pain point that we're hearing from all of our partners and partner labs around the world. We need more open resources. We need more open source. We need more cross-compatibility and operations between the stuffs that our universities are doing, our partners are doing. And so that's one of the big things that kind of came out in these last 2 years. So if you're interested in getting deeper, this is one of the places that you might want to have a look at moving forward. Lastly, just trying to put this all together. A lot of teachers, we're talking about the EACs and D cells of AI, and also the hype cycles. Different educators, different institutions, or different places on the hype cycle. So when we look at these graphs over here, the exponential growth of AI, or the pain points that we're feeling now of trying to implement these technologies. Different places are different places, especially higher education. It seems like it's a little more flat, right? They're a little less susceptible to big fluctuations in these curves. I have a couple of papers that I wrote trying to talk about the fears of educators that they have around implementing these technologies and how we might kind of alleviate those fears or work around these fears. And one of them is over-automating the learning process. And AI, coupled with XR technologies, is poised to do this like never before. Teachers feel like they're in this loop where they're compelled to use these technologies, and the data that they integrate or use or give up in their use of this technology is then used to make the next automated systems and this in this loop. And they're not fearful basically for their own jobs, but they're fearful about what we're going to lose in the process of inquiry by over-automating these processes with these technologies. So if you're out there talking to educators, trying to extol the benefits of them, one of the great fears that I've seen across the board from all educators and institutional managers is this over-automation fear. I'm out of time. Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for coming. And if you have any further information, my website, erichawkinson.com. And we say in Japan, goseicho arigato. Thanks for listening, everybody.